Welcome to the Whiskey and Wisdom Podcast, coming to you from the Cargo District Recording Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we discuss the most fascinating topics of life. I'm Tyler Yaw with my co-host, Chris Kellum, and each week we interview a special guest to learn how they acquired their wisdom over a glass of whiskey. So, sit back, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy Whiskey and Wisdom.
Happy New Year, and welcome back to the podcast. You have myself, Chris Kellum, and the constant co-host. Or am I the co-host?
I think we're both co-hosts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no one above the other in this game.
Tyler, y'all. And to start the year, like we said, we would end it on a good note. We have Coach Reggie, a.k.a. Pops, back on the podcast. And because, I think this extra añejo.
Añejo.
It's because there's an A at the front. That's what's, okay. Añejo. Añejo. We're still drinking on the Evian. Let's just go for it.
Yeah, so we're halfway into the bottle.
Yes.
Right
now. So, yeah, we're not starting off. We're already warmed up.
Yeah, exactly.
From the inside out.
There you go. I think that's how you just start your year. Like people who start
halfway through the bottle.
I don't think you should stop. The people who are like, oh, on January 1st, I'm going to start this, and this. I'm like, those are the people who tend to fail those goals. It's more, hey, how did you end the year? Keep that momentum and just keep it rolling into the next year. And that's what we're trying to do here is keep the momentum.
And since you brought that up and we're already talking about coaching, I'm going to bring up two things real quick about the coach that I actually have.
Yeah.
And kind of what Chris was saying, we do our 2023 planning in October. So we can figure out what we plan on doing and the standards that need to be put in place to reach those 2023 goals. And we start those in October and November. So we can continue the momentum going into January.
There we go.
So it keeps you up, keeps you going. And part of that too is one of the large things that we focus on is do not let the seduction of success stop you.
That's right.
And that was one thing that kind of got a hold of me is when I was in high school, I had this dream of like, I wanted this type of house, wanted this type of car, I wanted this wife and kids. And I hit that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great. And I stopped and just kind of kept keeping on what I was doing. And I'd never really took the foot off the pedal in my whole life. And it didn't feel right to me. It felt like I was losing purpose and kind of needed to jump back on that train. So that this is where this coach has really made a big difference in my life.
Yeah, I had something similar happen to me. I had, as we had talked about, had a, struggle point, a low point, really the lowest point I'd ever been, as an adult, financially and really. So had faced kind of business and personal financial devastation, probably wouldn't be an overstatement. So it was tough. And so I climbed out of that. And I got to a certain point to where I'd, somewhat recovered both business and personal and was in a pretty good place. And my coach picked up on the fact, and that's what the great thing about a good coach is, they can see things that you can't see for yourself. So if there's a case for coaching, it's somebody that, has experience and can just eyeball and make behaviors and listen to what you're saying and how you're saying, what you're languaging and your behavior, make observations that you just can't see for yourself. So he said, and I was behaving in a way, he picked up on something. And he said, Reggie, he said, are you living the life that you said you would live? No. Well, have you built the business you said you would build? No.
Right.
Quit acting like it. And so he had picked up the fact that I was acting like I had arrived. And I had arrived to a strong level, and I had grown a lot and developed a lot, was on a strong momentum path.
Right.
But he could see some behavior that I was starting to take off the gas, and that he knew I wanted more from life, and more for my business. But I was behaving in contrary for that. So he was great to bring that to my attention. And so, I've been taught over the years that, and I've seen it so many times in myself and with my clients, is once you're there, there's always another there.
Yep.
You know, because people ask me, like, how long is a coaching relationship? How long does this coaching program last? I was like, it lasts as long as it makes sense. But when it stops making sense, we're going to know.
Right.
But it goes as long as it makes sense. I mean, you can, give me a 30-day notice and we'll stop. Like, there's no contract. There's no anything. Like, when we're done, we're done. I don't want to be tied to you when you don't want to be some sort of contract or something. If you're not, I don't want to be stuck with you when you're wanting to plateau or just kind of hang out and tread water. Right. I don't want that any more than you want to probably be, engaging and have me be paying me and have to deal with me when you're plateaued. So we'll stop whenever you're where you want to be or when you want to cry uncle. But but what we've learned is that when you're there, once you get there, there's always another there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
More times than not. And then when you've got to where you want to get, and it's not uncommon that I've worked with people to help them get to where they want to go, or they've gone as far as they want. So, and salute, and, we, kind of part company, but but more times than not, it's not really where they wanted to go. It's, they don't want to do the tough stuff. It starts to get too hard.
Yeah.
And it starts to be too much to they'll make the kind of change to get comfortable, and they'll make the kind of change they want to be fat and happy. Right. It's the syndrome of fat and happy. And so, I see a lot of my relationships with my clients tail off at the point at where they go, you know what? And this is how it happens. I want to take a break from coaching for a little bit. I want to take a break. And I said, well, you know what? There's no such thing as breaks in coaching. I've done this too long. You don't take a break. What you're saying is, I just need to catch my breath for a while. And that's what they're saying. And they'll go, yeah. Okay, we're good. Well, when it makes sense, you come back. Oh, no, I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back in 3 months. More times than not. 80% of the time, they don't come back in 3 months. No. And they don't come back. And most of the time, they don't come back at all.
Yeah.
Because they're not even willing to, they're either not aware or willing to be honest enough with themselves to say, I don't want to do what it takes to become what I need to become to operate at the next level. And, you can tell them to the contrary. So, and challenge them on that. And then they'll often deny it or fight it a little bit.
Yeah.
But then all the evidence shows in the future that's what they were. And sometimes they'll come back to me a couple of years later and they'll go, you were right.
Right.
It was as far as I was willing to go. I had all I wanted, had more than I ever dreamed of. Or I was willing to do the work. They had dreams of much bigger things, but doing that work. And they had more than they've ever had in their life. But, they often fall short of their goals, dreams, and aspirations. But, if they get to a place where they're happy and ready to move on to something else, then, so be it. But that happens a lot. So that's that trap of what I call the trap of fat and happy.
Yeah.
And when you're fat and happy, I've got one guy that I worked with for a while that wanted to build he was dead set on building a $10 million business. I started working with him. He had a $900,000 business and he wasn't making a profit. So he really had he was making a very menial on paper profit, like a P&L gross profit and loss, gross profit, or net profit rather. It was pretty minimal. It was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 8-9%. 8-9% net profit on a P&L does not equal that much in cash. And the more he grew, the more issues he had. So he, and having all kinds of issues. And he had cash flow issues, getting paid too late. So the more he sold, the broker he got. And he was kind of on this. Anyway, so we fixed some things, really got focused. And by the way, but there's some good things happened in his business. He was only in business for a few years. All his business was on referral.
Wow. Yeah.
And he was really gifted at what he did. So he was doing a lot of things right, but he just wasn't making any money. So something wasn't right. So we found out what wasn't right. We fixed the money. Because if you're doing close to $1 million in sales and you're not making money, something's wrong. So, and we figured out what that was and we fixed those things and then started to increase revenue. And then we had some team issues, started to fix it. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So, and he was he was on a fast track. He was a very ambitious, smart, driven guy. And fast forward 3 years later, he's knocking out about $4 million in sales and 20% net.
Wow.
Okay. So by the way, through the math, he made $800,000 that year. Yeah. Right. So that was life-changing money to somebody who, and that was a quick trajectory. He did a lot of things right. And he was very aggressive and he engaged me at a real high level. I had not just worked with him, I worked with his team and we did a lot of things really, really quick. Yeah. But he wanted this $10 million business, wanted this $10 million business we're driving for. Well, he reached a point to where that $10 million kind of, we were doing a strategic planning session with his team, and it was kind of brought up like it was a joke, like amongst his wife kind of got involved in the business, and then one of his key team members, and they kind of had, there was a couple of jokes thrown out there about him and this $10 million business he wants to build. And it was kind of thrown out there as a joke, and I was like, whoa. And I was like, wait a second. This is what we're driving for. This seems like a punchline.
Yeah.
And well, about a couple of weeks later, he needed to meet, and it was one of those, this is the time where I was meeting, most everybody on Zoom, and this was post pandemic. So everybody was on Zoom, and he's like, oh, we need to meet face to face. All right. What's up?
Yeah.
And then he said, hey, it's time. And he said, you've done great things, changed my life. I can't measure the change that you've created in me and my business and for my team. And, I love you. My team loves you. Wouldn't be where I'm at you, but it's time. And I was like, well, what happened to I thought something was up because this $10 million punchline thing was an issue. And he said, man, that's what I wanted, but I'm here and life's good. And I'm making all the money I need. And it doesn't make a sense to continue to engage me, which is when you're going to plateau. You don't have a coach to plateau.
Yeah,
right. Or for maintenance mode, you want to have a coach you can have a mentor to plateau.
Sure. Yeah.
You can have somebody you talk to casually, but if you're going to grow, if the coaches are really to push you to grow, right? Why have somebody yelling, spitting in your face, right? If you're not wanting to grow and develop, and why have a trainer? Why does Rocky have Mickey, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully I can still use Rocky analogies.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, come on, Rock, blah, 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 you don't need all that if you're just trying to plateau. You get people that tell you what you want to hear and tell you how great you are. That's the story of Apollo Creed, right? Mm-hmm. Apollo Creed, he was plateaued.
Yeah.
Because he had people going around saying, hey, champ, you're the best. You're the best. You're all right. You're the best. You're good. You're good. You got people doing that to you. That's just hanging on to what you got and just trying to hang on to the title. So but that's the curse of the fat and I'll say the curse. I mean, it's great, man. He's where he wants to be, but sometimes people get there and they're like, you know what? This is a pretty good place. I'm all right. Man, $10 million. This is tough enough as it is at $4 or $5 million worth of business, running through the company and this many employees. And it's just not easy and simple. And I think I'm just going to hang out here and, see what happens next. So anyway, the curse of the fat and happy.
I appreciate that.
It's kind of crazy to think because you're talking about business standards, and I think that kind of pushes towards normal American mentality. Because there's so many people who go and they get a job and oh, I need to make this much money, or this is the job I should have getting out of college. Cool, I'm good, and they just ride the Groundhog Day until they realize they're dead, and. I feel like this conversation is the thing that will help push me through the next year, because I've hit a point where I've sold more than I ever expected to sell. Mm-hmm. And that's just one of those mentalities, because pretty much living with you and being around you and Tyler, just good vibe, people who just bring you up, forces you to catch up. And I hit a point where it's oh, I'm doing good. And then doing good isn't enough sometimes. And I'm you guys are helping me push through that fat and happy phase. And I'm let's go to the next level. And trying to figure out who can I reach out to help either mentor or coach to the next thing to kind of just grow myself. And I know we talk about coaching, and I feel like a mental coach, you've picked up somebody. It's not a mental coach. You shifted to therapy.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. See, I knew I would get the word one of these days.
Yeah. My mindset coach.
There we go.
There's somebody that's well renowned in my industry, or one of the leader in one of the organizations I'm part of. He'll say, yeah, well, my mindset coach. You mean your therapist? So let me come back to that, the therapy piece. Because you're right, I've integrated therapy in life to be able to back to what we talked about in part one, which was being able to accelerate growth of the mindset piece, or the B side of things. Back to B do have, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to grow the B, and what typically happens is your growth, your B at a certain point kind of drags you behind. And when it becomes an issue, you start to kind of work on your B and quit it, and it becomes less of a boat anchor. Well, what if, and this would be a great analogy if you could see my hands. So my hands are down below my other hand, like emulating a boat anchor that's dragging you down. Well, what if, and now my hand's moving up and simulating a helium balloon, right? So what if your B could pull you along? What if your mindset, what if the belief system, your value system, and your environment could pull you forward as opposed to drag you down as it does with somebody else? So when you talk about the typical American life is let's stop growing and developing. We only grow and develop as a culture by and large when we are put through the crucible of growing up, right? Going through school and all those things that we're part of growing up, or trying to accomplish a major goal, or maybe we're really involved in an athletic thing, or really driven by something. But in most cases, that's pretty isolated to certain areas in life. And once you get to a certain age, then you get what you need, and you just quit growing and developing and learning. And a lot of that's environmental as well. If you become, if you're the best salesperson where you're at, like say you're the top performer at your store. Well, if you have a mediocre store, right? If you have a store full of mediocre performers, that makes you feel good and look good. But is that the best you can be? Is that the best? So life is not just being better than everybody else around you or your peer group or whatever, right? Or even if you're in the middle of the pack. But if that's the best you can be, if that's the key in life is not, it's all about maximizing your full potential. So being able to maximize your full potential and be the best version of you can be. And if your environment's mediocre, then you've got to work especially hard to have high performers in your life, coaches, mentors that can see and are clear that, you know what, you can be a whole lot better than you are. And I'll be glad to guide and mentor. And it's also great to have an honest coach to say, you know what, you are really out kicking your coverage here. Like you're doing really well. Like, you see some guys with you see some mediocre guy with like a gorgeous woman. You're like, bruh, you have outkicked your coverage, man. You have done well. Keep doing what you're doing. Right. But don't mess this up because this is the best you're going to do because she's gorgeous and she's a wonderful person and she's this and this and that. So don't mess this up. Right. It's not better on the other side. No. So consider yourself lucky. So it's the same thing. So you may be that and you may just doing the best you can be. But if you're not, heaven forbid and probably one of the greatest, probably tragedies in life is living life that is far short of your potential, knowing you could have done more, but you just chose not to. And so many people do that. There's a great TED Talk. That I encourage you to, and there's a line within that, but the TED Talk is by Trav Bell. And Trav Bell is the bucket list guy. Yeah. Have I had to watch that, Chris? The bucket list guy? No. All right, so y'all's homework. Everybody on the podcast, I want you to do one thing that'll do some magical things for your life, that'll challenge yourself and, get you fired up and give you some fire in your belly. Watch Trav Bell's TED Talk he's the bucket list guy, so just Google TED Talk, Trav Bell, the bucket list guy. Life's way too short to life's too short not to have a bucket list or something. But one of the lines in there is so many people are dying at 40 and being buried at 70 and 80. And they just kind of get to that certain place and they get those certain things in life and they just start living life by default and just kind of get by and they quit growing, driving and developing. So I've just been super fortunate to have people like that. And I'm part of an organization that puts people like that in my life that continue to challenge, push, develop, and grow me so that I'm not, and it's part of an environment to where being static and just staying where you're at is just, it's not okay. Right. That, it's just a default world of growth and development. So pretty cool to be part of that world and, to have that kind of environment. It's definitely different than, the typical American culture and so many Western cultures for that matter. So I'm assuming you suggest therapy. Yeah. Oh, wait, circle back around. Thanks. Yes. I'm not great at that to start with, but but a few sips of tequila down the road, it's like, thanks, Chris, for redirecting me and putting me back on the road. So and as part of being in that world, I had a pretty strong teacher that eventually became my coach. But he advised me at one point. He said, one of the things, he's very specific by the way, he's a high performer and a high level coach. And, like we were talking about earlier, where, he's very clear about the people he brings on. Mm-hmm. And the standards in which he creates. So he says, look, I don't bring somebody on unless they're doing at least $5 million per annum. They got to do $5 million of revenue per annum. They don't do that, I don't bring them on. Right. He said they also must be willing to wanting to sell the business in the next 3 to 5 years. Because once you get to kind of like 5 million in sales, you start making plenty of money, 5 million, 10 million in sales. And that's, tons of reason for fat and happy, right? Yeah. And if they already have a successful business and they're doing that, then that's pretty good money. So they got to have a reason for work with him. They got to have a reason to exit and maximize value. Cause that's really what he is. He's the transition guy. He's the transition coach. He wants to transition you out of your existing business, grow it, sell it, and then move on. Right. So he's like, all right, so got to be willing to sell. So we got to have something to drive for, not just, sit on your piles of gold. And then they also you have to have a personal trainer.
Yeah.
I don't work with anybody without a personal trainer. You also have to have a psychotherapist. He's British, so they call him psychotherapist.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, interesting. And so he mentioned that, and I was like, I was wondering, why is that? And he said, one of the reasons why is because as coaches, you guys like to play therapists, and you aren't professionally trained. You're not trained on how to be therapists. So I was like, oh yeah, I found myself like playing a therapist, some like therapist light in some cases, for especially people I've worked with. I'm much more of a strategist and tactician when I first start working with people.
Yeah.
But over time, once the kind of, you start to get some basic tactics and strategy and get some framework in place. And then it becomes, after I've worked with somebody, my longest client's been with me. I've had a client that was with me for 14 years. I have one currently that's with me for 12 years, right? Sheesh. So a long time. So I've had, long-term relationships with a handful of my business owners. It's that whole, when you're there, there's another there kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And, most client relationships don't last that long, but I got a couple that have. And the guy that's been with me, after a while, you're down to a fireside chat and you start to dip into some therapy stuff because they've gotten all the easy stuff out of the way. All the easy stuff you can do is out of the way. Mm-hmm. Now, the mindset and the B is what we've done, all the do stuff. And now that mindset is what's holding them back, right? Mm-hmm. It starts to show up, and you can avoid some certain things for a while, but sooner or later, the things are going to become boat anchors for you and constraints. So, and I was like, I found myself playing therapist a little bit, and you can tell his mindset is what's dragging him back. Oh, by the way, there's a lot of almost all the high performing athletes that I have that I know, that I see, Olympic athletes, high performers, they have sports psychologists and mindset coaches, and most major colleges have sports performance psychologists and therapists. Let me give that a try. Yeah. So, and I'd always, to a certain degree, I've never had a therapist in my life because I always thought therapy was for folks that were dysfunctional at life. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any of those dysfunctional issues in life that most people, you better go to therapy for. I was never told you need to go to therapy, right? Never had any disorders, and not anything wrong with people that do that, but that was my conception. It was for folks that were dysfunctional in certain areas of life. So I was like, let me give this a try. So I started looking up. I was like, let me find I need a sports psychologist. I need something for a coach. There's a lot of coach theme in what I do and parallels. So I was looking for a sports performance therapist, and then I ran across a therapist that specialized in overwhelmed entrepreneurs and overcommitted executives. And it's like, this sounds like my girl. Yeah. I called her up, called up her office, and they said, she doesn't accept insurance. Which is the first screening call. Was like, right. Which means generally, if you don't accept insurance, that means you don't have to, because insurance is paying the tail and a lot of work. And they take a cut and all that kind of stuff. So that means she's probably pretty good if she doesn't have to take insurance, right? Yeah. And then she said, and I was like, this sounds like this could be my girl. And then she said, and also she's booked out for about 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this really sounds like my girl. Right. And so I was like, okay. Well, she's like, but I can put you on the waiting list. I was like, okay, put me on the waiting list. And I said, I started probing a little bit, trying to figure out how I can accelerate my way up the waiting list. And anyway, and she said, I've got somebody that was thinking about canceling, and they were going to cancel tomorrow with a fee. But I told them that's going to have the fee. So after that, he went ahead and accepted the appointment. I said, hey, let him know I'll take a spot. You think you can make that happen? She's like, you're wanting me, this is the receptionist I'm dealing with. She said, you're wanting me to talk somebody out of therapy. I said, well,
yeah, well,
do what you got to do. If you can pull it off, it'd be great, and I'll take care of you. So she responded like she wasn't a maitre d', wanting to. I couldn't grease the gatekeeper at the therapy office. So anyway, but she called back. She said, "Good news, he gave you the appointment." So I got in with her, and she was great. First, unlocked some. And by the way, I was there for business performance issues.
Yeah, she
tapped into something that was a business issue, and she was able to make clear that was a mommy and daddy issue. Huh. Yeah. It was the most amazing thing. And I profited from it like that day. It had to do with my pricing, by the way, just what I was charging folks. And I had a client I was with for 14 years. And guess what I charged her? Oh, by the way, her business had grown exponentially. Her business had grown from a $60,000 a year business in revenue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. About that time, she was doing close to $1 million.
Wow.
Guess what I charged her? Oh yeah, I charged the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. And so, charge the same thing. I brought on new clients and raised my fee up, but and she knew she had the deal. She had I caught Coach Reggie early deal. And I could justify it with, she sends me some referrals and she's a great case study. I got all kinds of mental constraints on and justifications and head trash on why I need to keep charging that same thing. And so it was a mommy and daddy issue. It was the need for recognition, achievement, and, trying to get my parents' approval and blah, blah, blah. It was, mommy and daddy issue. So I rectified that really quick. I was like, I got, and by the way, I more than tripled her fee at that point because it just had to catch up. Right? Yeah, so I tripled the fee, I more than tripled the fee. And then I said, your business has grown big enough to where I might probably do some teamwork. And so she bought this team add-on. So she had decided voluntarily to invest another, probably 40% on top of the fee for a, more premium service. Right. So, she was willing to spend the money. I was just had the mindset block and I had very good justifications. They were good, solid justifications on because I valued the relationship, and I still did, but her business has grown dramatically, and it's funny. So over time, so this was how to be a better coach, how to be a better business person, and how to grow my business, and how to make more money. And then every now and then I start throwing in stuff like, I don't know. I got this issue with my daughter. At the time, my daughter's like 17, 18 years old. So, and Chris, as you know, Sarah, my oldest daughter, she's the oldest daughter, very independent and strong-willed. She has the hard-headedness of both me and my wife without the wisdom, right? And also on the financial umbilical cord. So it's amazing how that, so she thought she knew it all, especially at that age. And I think God does something special with kids at a certain age, especially, you get to be 17, 18 years old. And, that's past time for you to go in most cultures. That's past time for you to go. They have sent you off at that age, but we hang on to them in our culture, right? But it was time for her to go. And so if we were button heads at a real strong age because she, button heads. She was exerting her independence. So we were button heads and I'm going to handle this my dad handled it, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, that dad that was really good at parenting because he had a child when he was 16. Can you imagine the parenting classes that he took and all the books he read on how to be an effective parent and all the coaching and mentoring and development that he got in the 70s? Yeah. No. Raised by a Depression era parent, right? Mine was it's go play in the street, man. That was, cars come, move, but go play in the street was a direction. Yes. There was no, hey, let me follow my app on the iPhone or where you're at. No. There's none of that, right? There was, come back, make sure you're back by this time or else, or good luck, go get them. So it's amazing how I was able to roam free in my community. Just as a kid, not doing anything wrong, really, just able to roam free, just, as far as my bike could take me. So she started to exert her. And so I was like, I'm just going to do what my dad did. My dad would just do this. I'm going to do this. And she's like, don't do that. Don't do that. And when a therapist can go, don't do that. Because usually they go what do you think? Or what do you think you should do? Or but whenever they go, don't do that. Because it's 90%, it's 90% of the time it's, what do you think you should do?
Yeah.
And which is the most aggravating thing with therapists, right? Which is, what do you think you should do? It's like, I'm asking you,
Right.
of course, because they want you to come up with your own ideas, and that's, part of their deal. But anytime they go, don't do that. And so she's like, well, think about this. And she's like, I know how this is going to work out. And same thing with my wife. Like, I'll say, I'm going to handle it this way. My wife would be in a disagreement, argument, something I take to her. I'm going to handle it this way. Don't do that. Don't do that. And so it's been really helpful. Oh, guess what? I could have used some guides, because at this point, like, I was considered myself a really above average parent. I had some really good kids, and they weren't perfect, but did a pretty good job. I kind of rocked it as a parent, especially at the early years.
Yeah.
Because Marine Corps, strict father, great mentor, teacher on command and control through a lot of things. So I had great kids. I had them kids you could take somewhere and not be ashamed of them, right? Yeah. My kids, and Chris saw them growing up, my kids were wired tight. And so, they'd behave, and yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no. So I had all that stuff, down. Yeah. Right. I liked really cool. We have a good party trick, because we were taught this we had a parenting class we went to. And we were taught that our kids were taught to do the interrupt rule. So, because I believe there's nothing worse than two adults talking and then some kid going, mama, 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 daddy, 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 interrupting two adults talking. Mm-hmm. I believe that to be very rude and disrespectful, right? Mm-hmm. So we were taught the interrupt rule, which is our kids' work, which is when you're talking, two adults are talking, then the kids come up and put their hand on your hip. And you put your hand on their hand and say, hey, I know you're there. Right, I see you, but let the adults are talking, and let's let them finish, and then we'll acknowledge you, right? Mm-hmm. And so, what a great party trick! Whenever you're at a thing with other kids, and their kids are going run around like wild people. So they and my kids would put their hand on their hip and then go, hey, and the people you're talking to look at you like you have a third eye, like, what happened there? It's like, oh, that's the interrupt rule, right? So really good at parenting at that phase. Now, what I have learned over time, and I've watched this by watching kids and their parents, the kids that were parents that were really strict. Strict's not the right word, but really had command and control over their children. And you need the command and control, by the way, so that when they're running toward the street and you go, stop, they freeze. Like, that's why you want to have command and control at an early age. It protects them. That teaches them respect, but also it protects them from doing things, from stopping. And instant response was something that we commanded, right? And we got, so that all works good. Now, people that were good at parenting at that phase, at the early years, where their kids were well behaved, they're all great, respect, all that kind of stuff, they often struggle when their kids exert their independence as teenagers.
It makes sense.
So have you seen that? Yeah. And remember the kids, like, we grew up, Chris, we know each other from an environment to where we saw a lot of kids grow up. And remember the kids that were bad when they were little? Sheesh. Like the kids were bad, right? They were out of control. They were kicking and screaming and spitting, always in timeout and all that kind of stuff. But when they got older, you're like, those kids are going to be bad.
They were fine.
And they're fine, right? And then the ones that are like really like perfect little kids, they kind of became a little bit of hellions once they got older. Like, not all, but there were exceptions to the rule, but a little tougher. What I found, I was a really good parent at the early ages, right? I get awards for stuff I've pulled off. They got older, man, they became tough because they start to exert that independence. And once you can't, like a certain age, you've lost control. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a bit of a struggle. So getting some help and support through that. Now, that's an example of how, therapy has been really important, not only to help me both professionally, but also help me personally become a much better father. Yeah. She actually had me read a book one time. I was doing some stuff. She's like, you need to read this book. So I read this book. And the book is 1, 2, 3 Perfect Teen. So, and it's also like, there's also a 1, 2, 3, like Perfect Parent or something, or kid 1, 2, 3 Perfect, Better Teen, Perfect. Anyway, look it up. But the 1, 2, 3 Perfect Teen, that she's like, you need to read this book. So I'm reading the book. I got halfway through, and I called Sarah. I was like, and Sarah was in her freshman year in college. I said, yeah. I called her and I said, hey, I just want you to let you know. So she hadn't fully disconnected yet, and I was like, I just want to let you know, I'm reading this book, I'm about halfway through, and I screwed a lot of things up for, with you. I'm like, I realized I did this wrong, I'm learning some stuff, and I just want to apologize. Like, you were my like guinea pig, and I'm, going to get better. Like, your brother and sister are going to benefit from me getting better at this. but I've screwed everything up with you. So anyway, I apologize for
my bad.
Yeah, my bad. That's right. My bad. And she's like, that's all right. She's like, I really could be better too. And I didn't make things any easier. And so we had this little moment of specialness. And so but being able to have somebody guide me through that and just go, no. And here's where to learn.
Yeah.
So, having that guides and directs to make me to be on somebody that's on Team Reggie, I can relate there. And it's made me a better father. It's made me a better husband. It's actually did enough impact for me where I was talking to some things about my wife and kind of sharing some things that she's going through with her mother and things. And she said, she's seeing somebody? And I was like, no. She's kind of had some, she's had hit or miss issues with therapists and those kind of things. And she said, hey, you know what? She could probably benefit hearing some things she's going through to kind of on stuff. So she got hooked up with somebody. And you talk about somebody that has grown and developed and benefited from and been empowered by, having somebody that's on Team Tina. And I've had somebody that's on Team Reggie and it's empowered her in a big way. And by the way, I don't know if you figured this out, but I'm a lot to deal with. I'm a lot. So from a power, strong feelings, and so I'm a lot to deal with. I'm pretty strong willed and my wife's pretty strong willed, but I have overpowered her over the years. But I'm the alpha. Right. And so being able to empower her to where when I need to be back down, and that's been helpful for her in that, but it's also been helpful in, navigating the aging parent issues and making her not feel guilty for, dealing with what is a tough situation. So it's been great to watch her grow. And then we've incorporated that, with our kids, recommended that. So having somebody that's on Team Reggie that is helping me be the best version of myself. So strongly believe everybody should have a therapist that is on your side, and don't wait till things are so bad to where life has burned down around you and you've done some very dysfunctional, counterproductive things. Start now, start early, because you get one shot at this life, and to be the best version of you and live the best life you have, having somebody that's on Team You, they can help guide and direct you. And then every now and then go, no, don't do that. Don't do that, to make you function, not just mediocre, not just getting by or just okay, but be the best version you can be. So that's something I tapped into about 4 or 5 years ago, man. And it has been pretty amazing, the difference in me interpersonally. And now watching my B pull me forward versus pull me back, hold me back, and have to deal with some of the mistakes. That's when my son got to that age. Right? You get to that age. I don't know if you were at that age, but I was at that age. A lot of men get to that age where they want to try their old man out. Right. And and he got to that age to where he was wanting to try me out. And you could see that ego. And by the way, in a lot of cultures about that age, before they hit that age, about 13, 14, it's when they are kicked out of the village, right? And go to fend for themselves, or, all kinds of rituals they have to go through. Yeah. But they're actually, in a lot of cultures, they're thrown out of the tribe because Dad knows what happens. Right. Like Dad, he's going to try to take us, and that's not a good look. So they just send them away and let them go on their own. Well, we're stuck with them in this culture until they're 18 plus. And so he was want to try me out. Trying what are you going to do? And that look of, they start to look at you and go, this ain't the first ass whooping I ever took. Right. I've been in, and not the ass whooping, not like a corporal punishment. I've been punched in the face before, not by me. Yeah, but they've been in fights in school before, and they learn they can take an ass whooping. They can take a fight, right? And they're not going to die. So you give me that look, let's see what happens. What are you going to do? Is that what you going to do? Look, right? And we know what that look is because we gave it to our old man too, right? So he started that energy started to happen. Yeah. What are you going to do? And of course the Marine and the Dwight's son and all that, came out to me. And my dad just, when I started to do that, he grabbed me by my, shirt, with two hands and just picked me up. Yeah. And I was bigger than my dad. Yeah. I was always bigger than he was, or was bigger than he was after I was 13, 14 years old. And he was pick me up on the wall and shake me a little bit. And, and he just made it clear that he had that old man strength and he could handle me. So we started to have that competition. And she said, you gotta be careful there. She's like, you got the power and control. You don't need to, you don't need to prove it. So quit trying to prove it. She's like, because I know where this ends up. Y'all end up rolling in the yard. And that's going to cause much bigger issues over time. So don't try to ego up. Just back off. You got the power and control. You don't have to prove it. So she caught something she saw a sign of something when it was small, caught it, guided, directed me. And it was so magical. She's like, because I've been here before tons and tons of times. And it was the first time I'd been through something like that. I had 2 other kids. My 2 girls, man, they didn't try to try me out. Right. They know how to work me in different ways, but they're not trying to get over on me or overpower me.
Right.
So he was in a certain way, just in his way. You could see it coming. So so she knew what it looked like, warned me about it. She said, here's how you handle it.
Yeah.
And I did what she said, and it worked magically. And as I backed off and quit trying to over-masculine him and try to exert power and control, how magical it was and how our relationship got a whole lot better when I quit trying to, over-masculate it, be the man. And I'm in control. So
that's what I'm there for. So anytime I come by the house, he always tries to buck up, and I'm like, "Well, I'm not the dad, so I can fight
you." So Chris, I want to talk about the background of our relationship.
I was going to ask too, because he always refers you to Pop, and then that was it.
That's right. Which confuses a lot of people, especially when so it confuses a lot of people. So, our relationship goes back to, we knew through church years ago.
Yes.
That's how we met. Like we taught like little kids, Sunday school. Actually, Chris became our helper. So I'll tell you how Chris actually and we always say that people, we always refer to Chris as like, Chris is our other kid. Like Chris is our surrogate kid. I always call him surrogate kid, but, and not to Tina, my wife, like that's to Tina, Chris is Tina's favorite kid. Like, and everybody knows the kids, like, because there's always a competition amongst our kids, like who's the favorite, and they all look at each other and they go, Chris. Chris is known as the favorite. I got a funny Thanksgiving story about that in a minute, but that'll be the end.
Right.
But we'll stick the landing with that one. But how we met is we took on foreign exchange students.
Okay.
So we had 3 small kids, like 6 months. 2.5 and 3 and 1.5 and 3.5. And like somebody I worked with at the time said, hey, there's this girl coming over from Germany or she's coming from Germany and she doesn't have a place to stay. And so it's very common in exchange students things because they always have more, especially from these organizations, especially from places like Germany. Germany's like, it's part of a rite of passage. Like it's really one of the steps to have a gap year and do it for an exchange program. It's very odd for U.S. students to do something like that, but it's like very, very common for a lot of those European people. So they always more students, they have homes to provide. So they got this whole game they play to where they do 2 steps. They say, hey, we got these kids that don't have homes, and that's a push, and send the word out and in social settings, and it happens a lot in churches, or like, hey, it's announcements in church and that kind of thing, and they use networks and emails and all those kind of things and then they have arrival students. So they say, well, you may want to take them for the whole year, but if you at least provide a home for them until they can find a family, we'll let them go to school and they'll make friends and they'll find a family, right? And it ends up the puppy dog clothes, they're in the house where, and you're like, oh, no, they're not so bad. And then you let them stay. And then we've had an experience one time to where after we let them stay, the rules changed the rules that they said they were going to follow by us. They like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. So that happened one time. That was the unhappy thing. But the first time it happened, first time that we had, so we were like, hey, and we saw this girl, she was like 15. And she took this picture, and it's like a year-long process. They go through a lot of training and development. So when she took her initial photo, so there's this picture of this little 14-year-old girl, cute, hadn't probably matured a lot, and looked like a sweet little girl. And she was. But then, so we said, yeah, she looks cool. Keep her Germany. Like, we got 3 kids around. They're small. Like, it'd be nice to have another set of hands around. And the hack is here, like, this girl's 14, 15 years old. My wife can't go to the store without an ordeal of packing everybody up. And, like, imagine packing up a 6-month-old, a 1.5 and a 3.5-year-old to the store. That's a thing. Yep. Like, it becomes a whole, you get everybody dressed on the thing. And just for a quick, I got to get this. So having a couple of nooks set of hands around that were babysitting age, that wasn't going to be a bad idea either. So we have so we're like, all right, what's one more mouth to feed? That's fine. They feed, and we all got to just feed them, right? They'll even watch the kids. They're like a kid, right? They're like having an older sister. So, she walks off the plane, and she's from Berlin. Her name's Greta, and she was from Berlin. Big city girl, showing up in the Wilmington airport. Let's just say that she had developed, and she walked off that looking like she came from Manhattan, and she was a grown woman, gorgeous, and very mature, built like a grown woman, dressed like a grown woman, like a girl out on the town. Yeah, and we were like, what are we gonna do with that? So anyway, so she come on, and she's a very sweet girl, good girl. And we were in the transition of moving. So we'd sold a house. We had moved into a condo that we had in Surf City. And then we were there for about a month. And of course, she took Topsail High School by storm, because here's this fancy metropolitan girl, made friends really, really quick, turned into a really big fish in this small pond and community. Well, we ended up selling so we had sold a house. We were going to build a house and we stayed in our condo. Well, that happened a lot faster, because I found out, back to the manufactured housing story, that I found out that I was going to be needing to find another job. So so I had to buy a house. So we moved back, to town because we're going to build, and then we didn't have time to build. So we just bought an existing house. Right. So we had to move. So our church had like this moving ministry, and they'd help people move. And so at this time now, we're taking her to church with us, and everybody in the youth group is intrigued about this new exchange student that was gorgeous. Yeah. Right. And anyway, she was special. So, and she had the attention. And so we happened to have a record-setting amount of youth boys show up on the moving ministry. Like, people said, the Shropshires need help moving. We have more 60. So before, when you start off, and you have the moving ministry there, and they all start off with a little bit of prayer beforehand, right, to make sure nobody gets hurt and everybody's safe, and to properly bless the transaction, right? And the guy that's leading, he was like, I'm grateful for all these young boys out here volunteering to help, right? So Chris is part of that crew, right?
Right. Wait, I will say I was not in the crew who went to their condo and moved them. I only know this because I didn't go to Topsail Beach until I was like in college age. I did help unload the truck, but I am also I will say, an extroverted introvert. So in public situations, I am like, I will go and talk to people just because I know it needs to be done. And all my friends are like, oh my gosh, you should link me up with that person. I'll set people up. Right. And then as soon as I'm not needed, I'm like, thank you, please let me go away. So I set up all my friends to help them move. And then I was like, I'm just going to step away. I'm gonna let y'all do the heavy lifting. And all the guys were like, oh my gosh, she's so gorgeous. She is a very pretty person. And I ain't no lie about that. So I set my friends up. I'm like, y'all can go help her move. You can all fight it out. I'll put you on that. And then I found out she had like 2 other friends. And so I'm not stupid. So I was like, I know how this game works. Right. You fight over that one, and I'll go talk to the other girl.
That's right. So Chris played the long game.
Right, exactly.
Yes. So I always played long con. And it still led to, they needed somebody in church to come by, and like, they did like a 3-year-old or something, like a really young age group. So you needed an extra person, an extra hand. And Greta was not going to be the extra hand all the time. So I was there to help them out. And then I joined the basketball team, and we had the stupidest practice time. So instead of going home, I just went to their house.
Yeah. Which is right across the street from the school. Yeah. Like you could look out our window and see the gym on the outside. So we lived right across the pond in College Road from Laney High School.
Oh, okay.
So it was really close. It was close. It was convenient. So Chris needed a place to hang out, like in between class or like in between school and practice. So we were just like, and he was kind of our helper in the Sunday school class, right? In the little preschool class. Yeah. So so he'd come over and he kind of became a fixture.
Yeah.
Right? So Chris kind of adopted us over time, right? And then we had multiple exchange students. We had Greta from, it was a great experience, great. And we said, let's do another one. So we did another one, and we had Kirsten then, and she was a great kid, and they became, and so we had these things, and then her and Chris became close over time. Chris was always there, and they were there. They ended up going to prom together.
Yes.
They weren't romantic or anything. They were just buddies,
right?
But they were a adorable prom couple, and so Chris kind of became a lot of their kind of social. And so he made friends with, all of them, over time. And so we always had this kind of inflow of exchange students, and, Chris just kept hanging around, because we had all these pretty German girls that were there.
Yeah.
And so that was a pretty good environment for Chris to be in. And we had we had enough size house. We had a house that we hadn't grown into yet. So I always had a little extra space. And before you know it, he was like, it's a long drive, because he lived in Rocky Point at the time. So it's a little time in. So he ended up kind of hanging around the house more and more often. The exchange students would go, but there's Chris, on the couch, and he had kind of took over a spare bedroom. And so the kids have always kind of grown up with Chris around from a pretty young age. One of the things about Chris is always, I considered myself to be a fairly strict disciplinarian. Chris was always harsher. Chris is always harsher. And I can be harsh, but I can also be the lovable, gooey dad. Right. He doesn't have that kind of affection toward the kids. So, and while Chris is gooey on the inside, not if they're not his kids.
Right.
So, and that's the same thing in preschool or the thing. He was always the heavy because his mom's the heavy. Yeah. His mom's strong. You don't mess with his mom, man. Yeah. She's tough. Parents, his mom's a school teacher. Parents are scared of his mom. You don't mess with Miss Kellum. Miss Kellum would set you right.
Yeah.
And everyone wants their kids in Chris Kellum's class. And because they know that's a good teacher, it's going to have them behaving well and all that kind of stuff. And you don't mess with Miss Kellum. You know that. Well, Chris is raised in that environment, oldest kid, strong, single mom, right? Yeah. And, so he was like that as well. So he's always kind of been the heavy around, enough to where I'm like, bruh, back off, man. That's a little harsh. Easy. So he even makes me a little like, and I get accused for being a little harsh sometimes, but Chris is always the heavy. So so Chris has always been around. So my kids have, and Chris is that older brother to all my kids. It's often and as the kids get older and Sarah gets like 15, he's the one that they can really go to over time and go, hey man, I'm in trouble. I need some of this or that. Or how do you, and stuff you don't bring up to your parents, but you bring up to somebody older that you trust that's not going to rat you out.
Right.
And he's been good about not ratting them out. He's a good safe space.
Yeah.
My kids will rat each other out all the time. But apparently Chris is like the Swiss bank.
Right.
All that stuff. So that's where the relationship with Chris has developed over the years to where he's just going to become part of the family. And he also helped. My wife was a photographer, and then she became his assistant. He became her assistant.
Right.
So she would go on jobs, and she needs somebody to shoot weddings and things. So she needed a person that, and Chris would just do whatever she said, because and Tina didn't have anybody like that in her life. Tina's always the person. My wife's always the person. Everybody goes to her for stuff, and she's really good at getting stuff done. But she didn't have anybody in her life. She didn't have that go-to person in her life. So Chris, not only became that in a work environment, but then he was always and he was working with her a lot on the weekends, and he was staying at the house more. And she could always go to Chris. And go, hey man, I need this, I need that, or can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? And Chris was like, yeah, I can do it, because he was kind of hanging out, and he got out of high school, he was kind of there, right, kind of living there for free to a certain degree, so he was always around, but more than willing to do whatever we asked of him. Yeah. Well, I was too busy working, I didn't ask anything from him, I'd come home late at night, and and anyway, but she could always depend on Chris. Right. So that's how Chris evolved into being Tina's person. And being the favorite. So anyway, as it evolved over time, I hear a siren in the background. I'm like, is that the music that's telling me that we got to go? No. So we're sitting around Thanksgiving one time. So this kind of evolved and over the years. And but Chris, so we're doing we did this thing for a couple of years to where it's like going around the horn and what are you most thankful for? Right. So we're just thinking what we're most thankful for. And And then so Tina's going through, it's Tina's turn, right? So she's going to what she's thankful for. And I'm thankful for, this and that. Actually going through each of the kids, right? And so she goes through each of the kids. She's like, and kind of in order, I'm thankful for Alexander and the great young man he's becoming. I'm thankful for Scarlett, how smart she's been, how does she go in school and does this and that. I'm thankful for Sarah, blah, blah, blah. And then she gets to Chris. Right? She's done everybody in the family. Like she's done me, she's done everybody, and Chris is last. And she gets to Chris, and she starts crying.
Oh no.
And she starts like tearing up, right? And we're like, you didn't tear up at any of us. But you get to Chris, because Chris is always there when I need him, and no matter what. And just is in total and complete tears. And we're all sitting there going, see?
He knew it was him.
He's the favorite. Yes. So that's kind of how it grows. So Chris is known as the favorite. So Chris is surely part of the family, and we've just grown close over the years. So it's been awesome to watch him grow, develop, and learn. And he's just been a great addition to the family. So anyway, he's got a great wife, and we were honored just to even be in the we kind of hung up. We were with the family, we weren't like hanging with the family or in the family section, we were the family. It confused the pastor a lot because there's Kim, his mom,
right,
and then there's Tina, his other mom, and so the pastor, who's he's a Pentecostal pastor.
Yeah.
And, we're down here in the city of Wilmington, and compared to up in the hills in Lenore,
right,
where the Presbyterians handle snakes up there, it's a little more conservative up there. So he didn't know what we were into down here. And then so there was at the rehearsal, there was a lot of confusion on, okay, so this is mom and this is mom.
Yes.
And then they met me.
Yes.
Really threw a wrench into it.
They really threw a wrench into it. And, so it often gets a lot of laugh and confusion about, because there's a pigment difference too.
Right.
Yeah. So when my lily white kids walk into Reed's and like, hey, we're looking for, Chris. They're like, okay, can we tell him who's here to see him? It's his sister. It's his brothers and sisters. We dropped a birthday present off the other day.
Right.
It's like, this is for Chris.
Yeah.
Just tell him it's for his birthday. Okay, well, you know who it's from? Just tell him it's from his brothers and sisters. And they just look so confused that we just walk out the door.
Every time.
That just makes it fun at this point.
But yeah, I call my mom, mama, any iteration. And then there's Mama Tina.
Yeah.
And then Pops. And it's also hilarious because we'll be sitting around the house and I'm like, I'll call him Pops or Papa. And then the kids would have to figure out, wait, what am I supposed to call him? Because sometimes I'll just call him Reggie because I'm an adult. And I'm like, oh, he's Reggie. And I remember randomly they'd be like, I feel like Alexander tried to call you Pops one time. And it was like, no.
Well, and he's at that age where he didn't want to call me daddy. Yeah. Like the girls call me daddy.
Yeah.
And I've always been daddy, always been daddy, always been daddy. Well, he got to that age to where he didn't want to call me daddy anymore. So he is transitioned. So he went through that phase of trying to figure out what to call me, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. And so he's just settled on father.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Father.
Yeah. Yeah. But he tried Pops once and it was like, no. We shut that down.
Anyway, so that unsolves the mystery of me and Chris know each other. So
yeah.
Anyway, all right. Anything we got to do before we close? We're probably catching toward the tail end of our time.
Yes. Tyler has a question.
We always have a final question for our guests on here.
Yeah.
And
actually, wait. I got a separate question before we end the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
I was sitting there talking to Tyler the other day, and I was like, this would be a good one to ask. And the question is, what does success and happiness mean to you?
Success and happiness.
Because I know you've hit a point in your life that it's a little bit different because people kind of hit it. Like we said, we have people who hit plateaus and they're like, I'm done, or they don't kind of care to move forward. So what does that kind of look like to you?
All right. I guess it would be the best definition. I don't know what the right definition is, but the best version of the answer to that question was brought to my attention in the last couple of years. And I bought it, which was it's being on your deathbed, reflecting back on your life and smiling and going, job well done.
Yeah.
I think that's success. I pulled that off without getting emotional because I was about to. I felt it coming because when I thought about it a minute ago. So I don't know. That's pretty powerful. I think if you look back on life and go, I wouldn't have done it any different.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did it right. I didn't do it right. It's worked out great. And if I go back on my life, I wouldn't have done it any different because it wouldn't have, and to be able to be on your deathbed and not to have regrets and to live the full life and gave it all you got and live the life you wanted to live. And it's not the life that you wanted to live when you were looking forward.
Right.
But you're able to look back and go, man, life was amazing. To have loved ones around you that, are sad to see you go, but that you had a great time with, and you had a great impact with them. Mm-hmm. They wanted to still be around you. And so I think it's, being able to look back and go, I wouldn't have done it any different. And be excited about the life you lived, not to have regrets and not say, I wish I could have, or I wish I did, that I left. I don't know. I think success in life is squeezing everything out of life you can and not leaving a lot on the table.
Like it. So since we went to the forward end, Tyler's got a question for the back end.
Yeah.
Right.
If you were to tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Tell my younger self one thing, what would it be? It would be that it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
It's going to be all right. That you can attempt something and fail. And if you fail at it and not to not do something because of the risk of failure or the risk of embarrassment or the risk of looking stupid, right? Or that if something happened that causes those things, that you're going to be better off for it. The greatest growth, accelerations in life and boosts in life come from adversity, hardship, and going through things that are tough. Right. So you can intentionally go through something that's tough, like I did in the Marine Corps. I intentionally did something that was tough because I knew it would grow and develop me over life. And I had a lot of buddies that are like, I ain't doing that. I'm not going to the toughest service. I'm going to the Air Force. Right. I'm going to the Coast Guard because that's and people at the Coast, that's not to discredit that at all. But there's a lot of people from a lot of services are like, yeah, I was thinking about being a Marine. Right. And so that's a joke we tell as Marines. Like, I almost went in the Marine Corps. So I did something, so I intentionally did something that was tough because I knew it would make me something. But I also went through things that I never would have wanted to wish on anybody that were tough, and how that's made me a better person today. And those adversities in life have been they're my superpowers at this point. So, glad I've had to figure it out on my own and glad that I've had to go through those. I've skinned my knees at times because those created, scars, and that I say scars in a way that or calluses rather, right? That in a very positive way that made me tougher and stronger. So I was afraid at certain points to take risks because bad stuff might happen, and sometimes you take risks and bad things happen, but you figure out what not to do. Right. Yep. And you pick yourself off. And I think some of the most successful people in life that I know in business are the ones that do things faster. They do things faster. They make mistakes faster. They learn faster. Right. And they figure out what doesn't work. So figure out what doesn't work so that you can figure out and get some guidance and direction. I probably could have benefited from guidance and direction a whole lot sooner. Yeah. Should have got that therapist 10 years sooner. I would have avoided a lot of the probably the marriage struggles. I would have been a better husband sooner. I would have had a better marriage sooner. I would have had a better business sooner. I would have had a better sooner if I would have gotten the right guidance coach people in my life that would have helped me a lot sooner. If I would have had a personal trainer sooner, I would have gotten better shape sooner, and I wouldn't have had some of the health issues I had I wouldn't have had so much weight on at a certain time, So get guidance and support, realize that you get one chance at life. The sooner you get help and support in the areas you need it, the sooner that you're going to get to where you want to go. Yeah. So enjoy life when you're young too, man. Don't just wait till you're 70 to enjoy life or retire or have that thing, man. At a certain point, you become too old to do some of the, all the fun stuff. Right. So smell the roses, enjoy life, travel, see the world, get different perspectives. Do a lot of the things you can when you're still young. Yeah. It'll benefit you sooner as opposed to just waiting to get all your perspective once you get too old to be able to use it.
Great.
So with that being said, I think this is a great way to start the new year off. I don't know who else we would have put on that would have brought so much perspective, both from looking back as well as looking forward in life and how to grow ourselves this year as well as in the years to come, which is what we're looking for both personally and for the podcast. We want to thank everybody who's listened to, I'm assuming we're pushing 50 episodes now.
Close to 50, yeah.
So listening to us from our entry stages of recording at UNCW,
yeah,
finding an open room and trying to record real quick.
I almost forgot about that already. It hasn't even been a year.
Listening to us doing some silly stuff as well as really bad editing and just kind of pushing through and kind of learning something. This whole podcast, I feel like, has just been...
We've learned a lot from this podcast. We started out not knowing anything about podcasting. We learned all of the equipment that we needed, and then we were lucky enough to almost literally fall into a place, and we had to do a little bit of light construction ourselves too, and we both haven't really had to dabble into that. So we painted a whole entire studio along with fixing some holes in walls and putting up a lot of recording equipment.
Yes. So thank you, everybody, for listening to the Whiskey and Wisdom podcast. As Pop mentioned, businessgrowers.co.
Yeah, businessgrowers.co. If you want, if you if you own a business, whether you just started up or own one for a while, we got a lot of cool things we do to help business owners grow. Some of which are this really cool thing that educates business owners, and it's called 30X. It's almost like getting an MBA in business ownership. It's not almost. It is getting the equivalent of an MBA in business ownership. And that's probably one of the coolest programs we started in the last year. And we do it in a way, I don't want to spoil it too much, and we also do a business owner playbook once a month that teaches business owners our playbook and gives them an offer to join through the 30X program, which is, financially, it's a pretty too good to be true kind of deal. So if you're interested, go on the website and businessgrowers.co. Look for it. Come to one of our business owner playbooks where we give some tips, hints, bring in for lunch, and no strings attached, anything like that. Find out what we're all about. See if you want to jump into our 30X program. That is one of those too good to be true kind of opportunities. If you're a business owner and really serious about growing your business, you'll learn more in 30 days than you've learned in 30 years of living about how to grow and build a business. So anyway, that's there's one message. I know you got a lot of young entrepreneurs and hustlers that, listen to this, I would recommend.
Exactly.
So, and you probably know some. So, we'd love to have you. We'd love to help you. That's our give back to the community in a lot of ways is teaching them how to be great business owners. And if they can become a great business owners, then, maybe there'll be something in it for us somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of investment that we're willing to make in especially young business owners to be able to grow and develop them. So come check us out.
Cool. I'll talk to you after the podcast too about that.
All right. Thank you guys for supporting, following. Please make sure to share, like, and leave a nice review for us because like Reggie said, and like my mom always said, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. See ya. Happy New Year. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.